Welcome to the Books of Titans podcast, hosted by Eric Rostad. Join him on his 15-year journey through the immortal books. He'll share what he's learning, explore profound ideas across time and cultures, and share the one thing he always hopes to remember from each immortal book.
Well, we are halfway through January. It is 2025, and I like to do one episode a year where I just give a preview of what I'll be reading in the coming year. So I want to just take a quick step back and talk about the project if you are new to Books of Titans. I started this in 2017 with the goal of reading more books and trying to come up with ways to better remember what it is that I was reading. So I came across Tim Ferriss's book, Tools of Titans. And in that book, he has a number of suggestions that top performers have given him in terms of the most gifted books, like the books that they've given out the most, and then their favorite books. And so while I was reading that in late 2016, I just started making a spreadsheet of the books mentioned that I wanted to read. And so I thought, what's a way that I can get through these? I want to read all these. These impacted top performers, and I'm hoping some of that magic rubs off on me. And I love reading. I just want it to become a bigger part of my life. So I started Books of Titans, kind of along the lines of the Tools of Titans title in that book, in order to get through more books and read some of these top books that were suggested by people. And so I did that in 2017. I finished the 52nd book of that year, shooting for one a week. I finished it right on December 31st as the fireworks were going off in my neighborhood for the new year. So I got through the 52 books, first time ever in my life, and decided to keep doing it. So from 2017 through 2022, I did that. I would make a yearly list of 52 books that I wanted to read. I'd randomize the order. I've got a number of episodes that deal with how I went through the process of deciding those and choosing and selecting the books. And it was great fun. I read a lot of fantastic books, but I started to realize that books come from books. And I started listening to podcast episodes that were talking about these things called the great books, and that there was a canon out there. There were lists of books, and the more lists that I looked at, the more kind of common titles I kept seeing. And I thought, I would really like to read these before I die. And I know myself, I know that if I don't make a plan to do that, if I don't set a goal of reading through them and make a list, I will never get through them. And so that's what I shifted to in 2023. So that was the first year of what I was then calling the Great Books Plus project. So I had the great books, and then I was going to include a guidebook of sorts for each of the books. And I've changed a few things in that going into 2025. And first is the name of it. So instead of the Great Books Plus, I'm now calling it the Immortal Books. I don't think the word the great books has the necessary gravitas for what these books contain. And so I'm going a little crazy here in retitling these, but I hope it catches on to some degree, and also just to show that these books are set apart. These are something special, and great is just not a good enough word in my mind to distinguish these books. So I'm going to start calling them the Immortal Books. And then I'm dropping this guidebook idea where I have to pair a book with a guidebook. Because once I got into these books, I realized that a lot of the versions I was reading had excellent introductions. And if I wanted to dig deeper, I can and I will get other books. But a lot of these introductions were kind of the material I was looking for to guide me into what it was that I was reading. So each time I do try to read the work first and then go back to the introduction or the guidebook, but it's just not, I'm not making it a key focus. Instead, just trying to get through these immortal books. So I'm in year 3 of this now of reading through the Immortal Books, and I'll highlight what those titles will be this year. Another big change this year is that I started a reading group. and both in person and online. And I hope you join. I hope you consider joining it. I've made it very easy and not a huge commitment in that I'm calling it the Short Great Books. And I know that conflicts with my new title of calling these the Immortal Books, but the idea here is that we just read one short book a month, one short great book. And so we actually had the first call this week, and we covered the Epic of Gilgamesh and had a fantastic time. And I also did it in person. So the in-person ones will be in Franklin, Tennessee at Landmark Booksellers, and we'll meet the second Monday of each month. The online portion will be 2 days after that second Monday, so it'll be on the Wednesday. And I have all the dates. I'll have this in the show notes of the titles for this year. And so, yeah, one great book, short great book a month. So in February, it's going to be Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass. And then in March, it will be Aeschylus and his tragedy play Agamemnon. So I really hope you consider joining. All you have to do is be a paid subscriber on my Substack, and I have plans for as little as $5 a month. So just think about it. You can join less than a cup of fancy coffee. You can join this reading group and join people from all over the world as we read through some of these short great books. So I am now in year 3 of the Immortal Books, and I'm reading them in chronological order. So I made a list of 200, and I can't call them books because it's not 200 books. It's more like 200 authors. And so that's kind of how I'm distinguishing this list of Immortal Books. It's 200 authors. And so for some authors, and in fact, most of the authors, it will just be one work. But for others, it will be multiple works. And so at the end, I'm guessing it'll probably be between 400 and 500 books total. And so I'm not reading the 200 Immortal Books. I'm reading more than that, but 200 is the number in the limit I'm trying to reach, and that's more on the author side. So it gets a little complicated in that a lot of especially the early works don't have a known author, like the Epic of Gilgamesh. We don't point to an author of that work, but they're kind of line items. So 200 line items, most of them have an author. And so there might be one book, there might be 2 books. I am trying to limit it to 2, but I got a little carried away on the Greek tragedy writers, and I decided to read all of their tragedy plays. So that's kind of in the midst of what I'm doing right now. But I do set up my reading year like a university schedule, and I found that to be very helpful. So I have a spring semester where I'm reading these Immortal Books. I have a summer break that's a month long. I have a fall semester where I'm back into the Immortal Books, and then I have a winter break. I start each year reading straight through a different version of the Bible, and that takes January and February. This is the 4th year that I've done this. I really like doing it. It's just something I want to do, and it informs my reading project. So I like seeing how the Bible impacts other works that I read, and then as I've been reading books that were compiled and stories that were compiled before the Bible, I enjoy seeing how those works may have influenced the writers of the Hebrew Bible, especially, and this kind of the portion I'm in right now. So that has been a great joy. It's something I plan to do the rest of my life. And so I just set aside January and February. And the other 3 times that I've done this, which were in year 2020, 2023, and then 2024. So this is my 4th year. Those other years I finished on the final day of February each time. And a couple of those times there was the extra leap year day. And so I was thankful for that. It actually helped me to finish in February, but I just kind of plan, like I know like how many pages I need to read per day, and I shoot for that. And so far I've ended on the last day of February each time. So this year I'm reading through the Barry Moser designed and illustrated King James Version of the Bible. So let me break that up a little bit. First, the King James, that's the first one in English. I believe 1611 was the year that came out. Not totally certain on that, but I think that's the date or around that time. And it's the one it's the one with the flowery language. It's the one that you've probably heard referenced, and a lot of literature points to that one. So if there's a reference to the Bible, that they'll probably use the King James Version, especially if it's older literature that's referencing the Bible in English that's referencing the Bible. So I've always wanted to read it. I've never read the King James Version, so this is my first time doing that. Barry Moser is an illustrator, and he does these beautiful woodcuts that are just stunning. And the Bible I have, it's enormous. I mean, it weighs a ton. I've carried it around a few times to outside of the house a few times, and I have a satchel bag that like perfectly fits it, but it's quite heavy, but it's kind of fun. And it has 160 plus illustrations, and then Barry Moser designed the layout of the Bible as well. So it's a really beautiful Bible. I've enjoyed going through that. And so that's January and February. And just kind of stats on that, I'm reading that Barry Moser edition, and it's 995 pages. And then I'm also going to read the King James Version of the Apocrypha, and that is not contained in the Barry Moser Bible. So I bought a separate King James Version of the Apocrypha put out by Cambridge. And so I'm going to insert that between the Old and New Testament. So total is 1,152 pages. I've read 162 of those so far. I'm in the book of Deuteronomy, which means I have 990 pages remaining. So we're in the 16th day of the year. I'm recording this on Thursday, January 16th, which means there's 43 days remaining until the end of February, which means I need to read 23 pages per day to finish it on time. So I think I could do it. The first 5 books usually take a lot longer than the rest of it. So I think I'll make it, but I like keeping track of those stats just to know where I am. So back to my yearly schedule, I found this to be just a wonderful way of mixing up my reading to where a large portion of it is planned, and it's the books that I want to get through. But then I also leave some room for serendipity. And that's what happens in those break months. So spring semester is March through June, and then July is my break month. And then fall semester is August through November, and then December is my break month. And in those break months, right now I'm collecting ideas for books that I want to read during those break months. So I'll mention a few that I've been thinking about and possibly adding in July. But that's how I work it. And I've kind of swung the pendulum in the past where everything is serendipity. You know, I walk into a bookstore and it's like, oh, here's the new shiny book. I'm going to read that now. But I've also done like 100% planned reading with no room for these chance encounters with books. So I like my schedule right now to where there is a great mix of both of those things, while the focus is on getting through this list of books, the immortal books that I really want to read before I die. So here I just want to highlight the books that are on the list so far this year. This is definitely bound to change. I had a lot of these on my list for last year and just did not have time for them. I ran out of time. So some of these will probably move to next year, but this is just, as of right now, this is the schedule. So I recently, when I was putting together that final list of 200 immortal books, I looked up the dates again. And so what I'm going by is in chronological order. And so for the ancient writers, I'm looking at the year of the death of the author. And that's what I'm basing it on. If there was no author, I'm looking at an estimated guess of when that work was compiled or written, that kind of thing. So I realized that I had skipped over Confucius and his Analects book. And so I'm going back to that. That's going to be the first book I start on March 1st in my spring semester. So everything else will be Greek this year, but that one I missed that, so I'm going to go back and read Confucius, and I may do a guidebook with that one just to better understand Confucianism as well. So I'm trying in this list of immortal books, I'm trying to have the main religious text for each of the world's main religions. So this one will be for Confucianism. Then after that, I get right back into the Greek tragedies. So I left off about right in the middle of the tragedies by Euripides. So last year I read the tragedy plays by Aeschylus and then Sophocles. Loved them, especially Sophocles. Made it halfway through Euripides, and then I will finish Euripides. And I'm going to do one strange thing this year in that I'm going to leave one of the Greek tragedies by Euripides unread because I simply cannot fathom the thought of having read all of the remaining and surviving tragedy plays. So I still want there to always be this one tragedy play that I haven't written, and that may seem ridiculous, but that's what I'm going to do. So here are the names of the Greek tragedies by Euripides that I have remaining, and I'm so sorry if I butcher these names, but what I usually do before the episode is search online for how to pronounce everything, and so I'm just going off the fly here. But these are the ones I have remaining for Euripides. Bacchae, the Bacchae, Iphigenia at Aulis, Rhesus, Suppliants, Phoenician Women, Ion, Helen, Orestes, Hippolytus temporizes in Ion. And so one of those I will leave unread. Then I'm going to do Euripides fragments, and those are broken up into two of those small green Loeb books. And I've just fallen in love with fragments and the idea of fragments. And so Euripides wrote over 100 tragedy plays. I believe we only have 19 that survive. And so I'm reading 18 of those 19, and then I'm going to go through these fragments. And the fragments are just simply what the title would suggest, in that they are fragments that we have. And so that could either be like Aristotle quoted something from one of the tragedy plays and we've lost the entire tragedy play, but here we have this fragment that Aristotle or another writer at around the time that had access to the full one referenced. And so we have a fragment that way, or we have an actual fragment of a physical fragment of the work on papyrus or something that we found, and we know that it's Euripides, but we only have a very small portion of it. So I love going through those because you see these lines from the tragedy plays. You don't know the context. Your mind goes kind of crazy thinking like, I wonder what this was from. I wonder what the play was about. We know the titles of a lot of them, but we don't necessarily know everything that happened in them. But these fragments just give these delightful little tidbits of the story. So I've enjoyed that. I did that with Sophocles, and I will do that with Aristophanes as well. After Euripides, I'm gonna read this book called Polis, which is a new history of the ancient Greek city-state from the early Iron Age to the end of antiquity. And the reason I want to do this is a book that came out last year by John Maw. I just kind of want to take a step back, and now that I've read Homer and some of the history and then these tragedy plays, some of the mythology, I just want to take a step back and look at ground level of what something that just kind of ties all these things together that wasn't from ancient times, like something that can compile a lot of the information that we have. And it's a huge book, but I'm really hoping that this is one that does that just kind of gives me a good step back and overview of Greece, ancient Greece, and all that, how the people lived in these city-states and what that meant and all that. So I hope that's what this book is about. It appears to be so. After that, I'm going to just kind of cap off the tragedies with reading an Oresteia, where it contains one work by Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. And I believe that is translated by Anne Carson. Let me look. Yes, that is correct. Anne Carson. And I read her fragments of Sappho, and I really enjoyed that. And so I like Anne Carson, and I wanted to just kind of close out the tragedies with another different translation than what I've read, and one by each of the tragedy play writers. Then I'm going to go into Xenophon and read Anabasis and Cyropaedia, which is about the education of Cyrus. So I read one Xenophon this year, Hellenica, and then I read Thucydides, sorry, not this year, but last year, 2024, and then read Thucydides as well. Read Herodotus in 2023, so that will be kind of the main history writers in their main works. Xenophon has a ton of works. I'm just going to read 3 total. So after that, I'm going to close out the Greek theater writers by going into Aristophanes. And my plan is to read all of Aristophanes' works. Aristophanes is the comedy writer. And so I'm going to go through Clouds, Birds, Lysistrata, Women of the Assembly, the Wasps, the Poet and the Women, the Frogs, the Acarnians, the Knights, Peace, Wealth, and then a couple that I have no idea I'm not even going to try to pronounce those, and then Plutus. And then I will finish with Aristophanes' Fragments. And I know this sounds like a lot for a spring semester. This is what I'm planning to read in spring semester. But these tragedy plays, they go pretty quickly. You can get through them in an hour and a half to 2 hours. I'm sure I'll reread some of them. But the things that are going to take the most time are Polus, Xenophon, and then, the comedies and tragedies should go rather quickly. Then I'm going to go into my break month, and that'll most likely be just during the month of July. Here are some books I've come across that I'm thinking of reading during that time. There is a local producer, musician, beloved figure here in Nashville named Charlie Peacock. We had him at Landmark Booksellers, where I'm business manager. We had him last year for an event, and unfortunately it was pouring rain and just very few people came, so I'm hoping we can get him back. But he's got a new book about his life called Roots in Rhythm, A Life in Music. And so I want to read that. Another title I came across that sounds really interesting is My Life in 17 Books, a literary memoir by John Sweeney. Just like the concept and think that would be fun. Another one, Myths of Mesopotamia. This is an Oxford World's Classics books, and it should fall under the Immortal books, and I actually referenced it when I was going through Gilgamesh, the Enuma Elish, and the Atrahasis, but it has a number of other works from Mesopotamia as well. And I just going through Gilgamesh again this past week with the reading group. Oh man, I love that stuff so much, and I want to read these other works from Mesopotamia. And so that's a relatively short book, so I'm going to try to get through that in that break month. I like reading just about kind of current events, having at least one book on that. So there's this one called We Need to Talk About Xi, and so that's the leader in China, and this is a book by Michael Dillon. And so it'd be good to learn more about the leader of China and kind of his plans for that for China going forward. I also want to read some book about AI, and so the one I'm looking at right now is Brave New Words by Salman Khan. He's head of the Khan Academy, and he's looking at AI and its role in education. And just as I kind of like looking at the idea of teaching or education, looking at AI specifically on the education front, I think will be very interesting. So looking forward to that. Then I get into fall semester, and this is where I jump into the philosophers. So that is if I have gotten through the works of Aristophanes and Euripides by that point. I will start getting into the philosophers, and that's going to be Plato and Aristotle. So I've got a list of all the ones that I want to read. It's highly unlikely that I will get through them all. I'm at least hoping to get a good and decent start on Plato. And then I have a few other books alongside of Plato, whether it's commentaries or there's one called The Cave and the Light by Arthur Herman that talks about both Plato and Aristotle. So looking forward to going through those. And then I'll have a few other works by Greeks, and then it really starts moving into the Roman authors. And so that will likely be the shift that I have next year in 2026, moving from the Greeks to the Romans. And so 2024, I called that my big fat Greek reading list, and that was the theme of the year. This year, my theme is, I'm calling it the Greek tragedies, comedies, and philosophy. And so I've got the one work by Confucius, but otherwise everything is from Greece. And so that theme is just going to be, kind of closing out the tragedies, comedies, and then histories, and then moving into Greek philosophy. So that's what I have in store for this year. I'm so excited. I wanted to highlight just a few things that I am most excited about. And so I've got a few categories here, and then I'll just highlight the work for that. So the thing I'm most excited about is Aristotle's Poetics. I've seen it referenced a lot in in works around the tragedies in Homer. So my understanding is that Aristotle's looking back at these stories and just kind of picking them apart in a way, but just looking at them in the storytelling aspects and how you put together a tragedy and that kind of thing. And after having read these works now, I can't wait to look at that in Aristotle's thoughts on these works. As for what I'm most curious about, that's going to be Confucius. I just don't even really know what to expect. I don't know if it's going to read like wisdom literature or like a religious text, but I'm really looking forward to that, and that's what I'm most curious about in 2025. Most interesting, that Myths of Mesopotamia. There's something about that time, and I'm really excited about reading more of the myths from Mesopotamia. The book where I don't know what to expect is Aristophanes, and that's going to be more the writer. I don't know what to expect. Just in terms of them being comedies, like I understand tragedy, and I read once where a tragedy is something that kind of starts out sad, gets humorous, and then returns to sad. Where this at a very basic level, and then a comedy is more something that starts funny, gets sad, and then closes out with funny or humorous. And so I'll see if that's the case, but I just don't know what to expect in these stories, and so I'm really looking forward to getting into them. And then the last final category here for what am I most scared about, that's going to be Plato and the philosophers. I just remember being in college and taking a philosophy course, and the whole thing just going so far over my head. And so I have this fear of philosophy, and will I understand it? Will I know what is going on? How is it going to go this time around? And in the first year of this reading project, I read The Republic by Plato, and it was largely over my head. And so what I'm hoping for is that having now read Homer, having read some of the tragedy plays, I'm hoping that gave me more of a base, of a foundation from which to now explore Plato and Aristotle. And I'm hoping they make sense to me. I'm hoping I understand more of the references, and that I kind of see Plato taking ideas that I've come across, whether it's in Homer or the tragedy plays, and then seeing Plato kind of take it to the next step and more on a philosophical side. So really looking forward to that, but I am quite scared of it as well. Just a few other plans for this year. In February, so the church I go to, they do a yearly fast from social media. You just step away from social media for a while. And I did that last year, and it's during Lent. But what I didn't realize is it's during Lent, and Lent is 40 days, but the way they count Lent is only during the week. I still don't fully understand how it worked, but it ended up being like well over 40 days. And so I was out of social media for it seemed like forever, and I really didn't like it. Social media for me, especially with this reading project, is a way I'm connecting with people, sharing ideas, like learning from others. And I just gave it, it was just full cold turkey, like didn't check in, didn't post. And I really missed it. So I may do something different this year of just kind of more limit how much I use it, just so I'm not getting addicted and spending every time I open up my phone, opening it up and seeing what's going on, but probably just setting more limits this year. But it is fun. It is fun when to do that, just to see how addicted you are and make some adjustments. So I'll probably doing that February, March timeframe around Lent, and see how that goes. I do have, I do plan to go to Scotland again this year. I love going over to the UK. My wife's a singer-songwriter and does music over there. And so we try to bring our daughters each time as well. But when I'm over there, I frequent all the bookstores. I love going to them, and it's just a delight. So that's further part of the plans. And then again, just that short great books reading group. So I do hope that you consider joining. Again, it's such a minimal fee. It's like $5 a month. We're going to talk about some awesome books this year, and I hope that you consider joining in on that. want to close out with this. I was on a podcast episode where we do it each year. It's with Scott Townsend. And he asked a question this year that I've been thinking about since then. And the question was, are you doing this to check it off a list? Like, are you reading through these immortal books just to check it off? Like to say, oh, I've read the great books, or I've read the immortal books. And I thought about it for a second, and I thought maybe at the beginning when I started, there was some aspect of that of just, I want to check it off the bucket list of life and having read through these great books. But the more I've gone through them, like this is the most enjoyable reading I've ever had in my entire life. I finished these books and I'm just like, I can't believe I'm in my 40s and I haven't read them. Like how much better would it have been 20 years ago to have started on these and have that foundation? And I can't go back, obviously, and change that. But I'm glad I've started at this point at least. But it is such a joy. It's not like, oh, these are boring old books that don't relate to our lives. Like they relate to our lives more than a lot of the stuff that's coming out today. So I want to encourage you to consider reading books like this. You can have other books in the mix and fun current books. And I like doing that during my break months as well. But make a plan, whether it's just starting with one book a year or a few books a year, but really make a plan to go through some of these books. I've also seen a huge benefit in doing them in a chronological manner. So maybe you just decide, I only want to read 10 of these books, of these immortal books or something. Pick the 10 best, but then read them in chronological order. Or I want to make a plan of the top 25 or top 50 or top 100. I can help you put together that list, or you can consult my list of immortal books and pick and choose from there. But I want to encourage you to do that because these books are so rich. They are talking about things that are deep within every person. They are well thought out. They are just so rich. So consider that in this new year as well. And if you need some help getting started, consider joining that Short Great Books reading list. That's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for following this project. It is a labor of love. I love reading, and I can't believe I'm being able to read these incredible books now. I just never imagined myself, talking about Thucydides or Aristotle and actually knowing what they're talking about and going into these works and discussing them with others. It's been such a delight. You can follow me at booksoftitans.com. That is where the Substack is. That's where the podcast lives. And then I have books.booksoftitans.com as well. And that's where I have my yearly reading lists. That's where I post my immortal book list, my immortal reading list. And each book I've got a review. I've got other sources and resources for each of the books. So I encourage you to go to those places. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Books of Titans on both of those platforms. I'll be back in a week or two talking about more books. And until then, keep learning, keep listening, and keep reading. I'm out.